Hi, welcome to lesson 7. This is coastal erosion and we are today looking at wave cut platforms. Please write the title. There aren't any keywords as such because the keywords we cover, we're going to discover what they are as part of the lesson. Here is your Connect quiz. Please pause the video, do the quiz, and then we'll mark the answers on the next slide. So here are your answers. Please correct them in green pen. So before we look at wave cut platforms which are formed by erosion on a coastline, I'd like us to understand the 4 different types. First thing you need to do is click on the link in the description and that will take you to a really crystal clear video that shows you the 4 different types of erosion. Then come back to here, and what I'd like you to do is to take half a page in your book and I'd like you to draw 4 boxes, okay? So just as I've done here at the bottom, I want you to draw 4 boxes, take about half a page or you know, as much space as you need. And I'm going to talk through these 4 types of erosion, which will be a bit more familiar as you will have watched the film. So the first type is hydraulic action. Now this is when the force of the water compresses air in the cracks in rocks, and then the cracks over time get bigger, the cracks expand. So just once more, this is when the force of the sea, the force of the seawater compresses air in the cracks in rocks, and then as that air is released, it expands and the cracks get bigger. So please get creative and draw yourself a diagram that represents hydraulic action. The next one is called abrasion, and this is a bit more straightforward. This is when rocks and stones, as you can see from the cartoon, this is when they are thrown against the cliff face, and over time bits of the cliff will start to break off and fall off. So one more time, abrasion is where rocks and stones collide or are thrown against the cliff or the coast and bits of the coast fall off. The third type is called solution. Now solution is where slightly acidic seawater dissolves soft rock. It's often sedimentary, it's often things like chalk and clay. So this is when slightly acidic seawater dissolves rock. This happens slowly, this is much more gradual than the previous 2. So please draw a diagram, look at the cartoon now and see if you can come up with a way of representing it yourself. The last one is called attrition. Now if you've been to a park where there's a riverbed, often near the stump of a tree, you'll find really round shiny pebbles. Now this is what happens with attrition. This is how pebbles are formed, where rocks bump against each other, they collide with one another, and over time they get worn down, they get smaller and smoother. So attrition is when rocks and stones collide with each other, becoming smaller and smoother over time. So again, draw yourself a diagram for that explanation. This is an example of the kind of thing you needed to do. Look, it's just got to be a simple diagram. It doesn't need to be a piece of art. So if this helps to do your diagrams, please use it. So what I'd like us to do now is pause the video, and I'm going to give you 4 minutes, and I want to keep it simple. I want you to explain 2 of the 4 different types of coastal erosion. It's up to you which 2 to use. My feeling is that hydraulic action is a good one to do because it's slightly more technical, slightly more challenging. But note with this, it says explain 2. So we're going to choose 2 of the 4. And the thing is, you get a mark for just naming one of the types of erosion. And the way we're going to do this is a simple point, develop, and a point, develop. Pause the video now, answers coming up shortly. So we could have said hydraulic action, point, is where the force of water compresses air in cracks and the cracks expand, or words to that effect. We could have said abrasion, point, which is when rocks collide with the coast, develop. We could have said attrition, which is where rocks and stones collide with each other, becoming smaller and smoother. We mentioned that too. And then lastly, solution. This is when acidic seawater dissolves soft rock. Please give yourselves a mark out of 4 and green pen anything you didn't get right. So we're going to learn about this amazing feature called a wave cut platform. We're going to find out how it's formed. We're going to draw a simple sketch, and then we're going to test your understanding of it. So I'm a big fan of these animations because videos don't work on these narrated PowerPoints. That's happening a little quickly, if I'm honest. But you can see that the sea is involved here. The sea is eroding a cliff here. But look carefully and ask yourself, which part of the cliff is being eroded first? Which part of it is being eroded first? And then what happens to the cliff over time? So here's how it works, a wave cut platform. If you could please just write the title somewhere. Wave cut platform. And to do this, we're going to use the process feature approach to physical geography, which, if you remember, we used when we learned about the Lake District and when we learned about the Weald. So we're going to find out how a wave cut platform is formed. Now, if you remember from the animation, it was the base of the cliff that gets attacked by the sea first. So what I'd like you please to draw, first off, I'd like you to draw this kind of shape here. Now, the first thing that happens is that the waves, through hydraulic action and abrasion, they erode the base of the cliff. They crash down. It's often going to be destructive waves that crash down onto the shoreline. And as a result, we get this strange formation here. So the first process is hydraulic action and abrasion at the base of the cliff. As a result of this, we have something called a wave cut notch, which is like a cutaway part. Okay, this process is actually called undercutting, where it cuts under the base of the cliff. So that's our first feature, is a wave cut notch. But what you can see is that over time, that's going to start getting quite unstable. The top of the cliff is going to be really, really heavy. This part here is going to be really, really heavy. And so what happens over time is it starts to collapse. The top of the cliff starts to collapse. So what you have happening is that the cliff retreats and it moves backwards. It becomes unstable, it collapses, and it moves backwards. And this is the process of cliff retreat. Then the last thing is our final feature, is this thing called a wave cut platform. Okay, you can't quite see the label there. This is the last thing, which is the wave cut platform, which is a flat area that you can see at low tide. So if you want to mark on your diagram that this is at high tide, this is at high tide, and this here is at low tide. So it's something that you will only see when the sea is really far out at low tide, and then when the water comes up, it tends to hide it, it submerges it. So what I like to do is copy that diagram with those labels, and then we're going to see if we can write that up in the next screen. Here's another example that I found. You know, it's a bit more of an artwork here. There's something missing from it though, which is why I didn't want to use it. There's something missing from it. As nice looking as it is, there's something missing. What we had missing was our process, hydraulic action. Okay, so it's far from perfect, but I'd like you to include that on your diagram. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this process feature approach, use your diagrams, go back in the video if you need to. We're going to explain the formation of a wave cut platform. The best way to do this is to tell it like a story. It's a 4-mark question. It's an explain question, so we need to have reasons in there. We need to have connectives as well. Best way to start it is like a story. Start with a connective such as firstly, and then begin explaining what happens, and look at your diagram and take the process feature approach to doing this. Pause the video now, give it a go. Okay, so what we've got, firstly, hydraulic action or abrasion erodes, or we could have said undercuts, the base of the cliff. This forms our first feature, a wave cut notch. The cliff then becomes unstable or weak or any kind of word like that, so it retreats, it moves backwards. Then this leaves behind a wave cut platform at low tide or below the high tide watermark. Now if we were just to mark this up with process feature, we would see that there's your first process. I suppose base of the cliff is a feature of sorts. This forms a wave cut notch, there's our feature. The cliff becomes unstable, so it retreats. So cliff retreat is our second process, and our final feature is the one we are going for, where the question, where it references the question, the wave cut platform. Give yourself a mark out of 4, correct with green pen. Okay, what I'd like us to do, please, is to pause the video, do the quiz, and then mark your answers on the next screen. So here's your answers, and correct them as you go. So year 10, the next lesson we're going to look at headlands in a bit more detail, and there should be some really interesting landforms for us to look at there too. Thanks very much.